Um, okay, let me just say, got it. There we go. Okay, thank you, and hello for everyone who is joining us today. Oh, my camera's now it's taking a nosedive. Here we go. It's been fine. So thank you to the library for inviting me to do this. I kind of crash coursed and watched a bunch of the in our kitchens to kind of get a feel for what this was, and it's really such an amazing community thing. So if you haven't seen others, I really suggest you go back and look at them because they're really a great community event. So I appreciated being included and invited into this. So today I've decided to make, it's a very simple recipe. I've done cooking classes in the past. Prior to having the cafe in town, I was a health coach and I worked with people around nutrition and diet and more holistic foods. So a lot of the classes I've done in the past have been centered around that. And so I was feeling like I needed to choose a health food or something that I could teach the nutrition of each of the components while cooking. And a lot of those foods are lighter and they're more for different, they're foods that we eat more in the spring and the summer. And when you're thinking of your holistic diet, you want to eat foods in the winter that are going to be warming, foods that you have on hand that aren't growing in nature. And so that led me to this recipe, something that I like. I was just saying to Judy, like a stock that we keep vegetable ends or whatever in our freezer for. I kind of collect throughout the winter baked goods and bread stocks to make a bread pudding. And so if I have something left over, a lot of the bread I'm using today is from just that. So this winter, I think around Christmas, I bought a loaf of bread. It was a beautiful loaf of bread. At the end of it, I couldn't finish. We had been eating out a lot and weren't eating at home and it was going stale. So I took the bread, threw it in the freezer. Last weekend, we went off island. We brought home donuts. The donuts sat on the counter for a couple of days. I was done letting my kids eat donuts. I was done eating donuts myself. So I took the donuts and I threw them in the freezer, knowing that my bread pudding stock would kind of be working itself. And then I have a half a loaf of Italian bread from a meal earlier this week. One thing I would say with this bread pudding is I always try to use a crusty bread. This recipe was developed in the cafe when I have, we use these beautiful crusty sourdough loaves for our toast, and we always have the bread ends left over. So we'll stick those in the freezer, and then any leftover baked goods like our blueberry muffins or donuts or anything that we have that we don't sell, we'll throw those in our bread pudding stock as well. And it kind of can dictate what flavor your bread pudding is. So today we're making a cherry chocolate pecan bread pudding because I always have dried nuts and fruit and chocolate chips on hand for baking at home. But in the cafe, sometimes if we have like blueberry muffins will get thrown in the mix, then you might want to add blueberries and some lemon zest and make like a lemon blueberry bread pudding. In the past, I've made it with banana bread, and then I've made pureed banana or some sliced banana in there, as well as chocolate chips, and made a banana chocolate bread pudding. What was one other time I came home from a brunch and had cheese danishes, and so I put the cheese danish in as well as the crusty bread, some raspberry jam and some cream cheese, and made this really nice raspberry cream cheese bread pudding. So you start with the base of what I'm going to do today, and then you can kind of take it wherever, whatever gets left over in your house. So it starts with 4 to 5 cups of bread or baked goods. So I started kind of breaking up the bread, but I have this other stuff I want to keep working on here. So I'll just kind of, you can either use a knife, which with the sliced bread I do, it's quicker. Or you can tear it with your hands. And this bread was stale already, like I said, but if you're working with fresh bread, you're gonna wanna leave it out and let it sit and stale up a little bit so that when you make your liquid to pour over it, it absorbs the liquid really nicely. This is a recipe that when there's downtime in the cafe, I have a lot of young people that work for me, and they might not necessarily be super experienced or skilled in the kitchen, although they're always learning. But this is a great recipe where they can pull out the recipe book and kind of stand around the bowl and tear up the bread and work together. And at the end, make something that's really simple, but super decadent and like a real professional dessert, and feel really good about it. So I'm just going to finish tearing up the rest of this bread. Add my donuts. I'm switching between knives here to see what works best. What's nice about this recipe too is it's really, like I said, basic ingredients that you have on hand, very recognizable ingredients too. If you're cooking with kids, either your own or your grandchildren, it's all things that they could easily do. They can tear up the pieces of bread. The ingredients are recognizable. So milk, eggs, butter, bread, kind of like a farmhouse. You can make it savory and use it for, serve it for a breakfast. In this case, it's going to be more of a dessert. I've cut my recipe in half. So the recipe I'm going to be sharing with you is half of what I normally make. So I typically make it in a 9 by 12 inch pan. But today I made half the recipe ahead of time so you can see it afterwards, the finished product. And I'm making the other half of the recipe now. So 5 eggs. My little countertop compost here. Let me see. And I'm making this bread pudding dairy free. My son and my husband, neither of them digest dairy very well. So in the cafe, I make it with regular milk or cream, cow's milk or cream, and butter. But since they'll be having some of this with us, I've decided to make this batch dairy free and figured you could see that as well, that it's really easy to substitute. So I'm going to use almond milk and Earth Balance, which is a non-hydrogenated vegetable oil replacement for butter. So it's really tasty. It acts like butter in recipes. And I'm going to bring some of this finished product to the library. So if anyone wants to try it, you'll notice that you won't know any difference between the nut milk and vegetable spread. So 2 cups of milk and my 5 eggs. A tablespoon of vanilla. A half a teaspoon of salt. I hate measuring in recipes. So this is another reason this is great. It's like it's baking, but it's not. You don't need the accuracy of when you're baking something. It's not a perfect science, which I love.
I noticed that you had your vanilla in a jar. Now, do you buy in a bigger quantity, or do you
yeah, that was actually left over from a bigger quantity that we had at the cafe that I brought home with me for the winter. So that's why it's in the jar. I have made my own vanilla. It's not economical for the amount that we use, but I also have a really nice vanilla powder. It's a Madagascar vanilla powder, which I actually use in the brownie mixes when I make them to sell at Christmas. But it has a really nice flavor if you don't want to add liquid to whatever recipe you're working on. So let me make sure I have everything in here. I have my eggs, my milk, my sugar, my vanilla, and my salt. This bowl is a little small for what we're doing, but I'm going to pour the liquid ingredients over the bread. And I'm going to glove up. In the cafe, we're always wearing gloves. I love having them under the kitchen at home for this kind of stuff, especially if I'm going to share or making the meal for, you know, if I'm making dessert for a dinner party. It's always nice to follow all those health codes. So I'm mixing the liquid ingredients in with the bread, and the bread is really nice and dry, so it's going to absorb and start to soak those ingredients up. And I'm going to make sure it's all the bread is coated. And then I'll put it aside to sit and continue to absorb while we make the topping. So I took this earth balance out. Like I said, it acts like butter, which is really nice. I took this out about a half hour before I knew I was going to use it. Whenever I forget to soften my butter, I will, I used to, this is kind of gross, but I used to keep it wrapped and I would just tuck it in my bosom, and it would warm up and it would soften really quickly. And then I learned a trick online where you can take a cup and fill it with like a pint glass and fill it with boiling water, and then dump the boiling water out and sit the cup over the stick of butter, and that'll help it soften faster if you forget to take it out ahead of time. This is pretty soft. So I'm mixing my half a stick of butter with half a cup of brown sugar. And a half a cup of pecans. And I'm realizing while I do this that I forgot to put the sugar in the bread pudding mixture. So I'm going to have to mix that in now after the fact. This butter, brown sugar, and pecan mixture is going to go over the top of the bread pudding once it's in the pan. And you can get the crumbles of butter really nice and broken up, but it actually, even if it stays a little chunky, it's all going to be baked in and melted into the top of the bread pudding. So it's okay if it's not completely broken up. What I forgot in the milk and egg mixture is the regular sugar that I use in the base of the bread pudding. So I'm going to use a coconut sugar. It's a whole food, so it's not stripped of any of its nutrients or minerals. So this is actually going to be a lower glycemic sugar than your regular white sugar would be. And it has a nice, just mellow, sweet flavor. It has a little bit more depth of flavor than white sugar does, but not a strong flavor like maple syrup or honey would. I'm going to need my gloves back to mix this in. So you would normally want to mix the sugar in with the milk and the eggs, but this isn't going to affect it at all, really. Hi, Cindy. So I'm adding this cup of coconut sugar to the bread and pudding mixture. And I'll send the recipe. I think the library emails them out maybe, or do you send it with the, I don't know. I remember hearing that some people were sending the recipe around, but I'll send it over. I can even post it to the bulletin, I suppose.
We have a guest here today.
Oh my goodness. Hi. Hi, Althea May. All right. So we've got quite the bread soup here, but you'll see when it's done how delicious. So for this one, I'm going to use, like I said, cherries, chocolate, and pecans. What I'm using today is just a dried Bing cherry from Trader Joe's. What I like about these is they're kind of tart, and they have a real nice, like, you'll taste the cherry in the recipe. You want to cut them up because this is kind of a lot. This is a big bite of cherry, especially with the tartness. So you want to disperse that flavor throughout the bread pudding. So I'm going to cut that up. It's about a 1/4 cup of the Bing cherries, chopped up small. I'm going to add them to the bread pudding mixture. A 1/4 cup of chocolate chips. And I'll just add some pecans in it for good measure, but most of the pecans are going to be on the top. Mix this with. These don't have to be mixed in so thoroughly because when you transfer it to the pan, they'll kind of mix in on their own, but just kind of coating everything with it, mixing it all together. So for this, since I split the recipe in two, I'm actually going to cook it in a cast iron pan. The other one I used a baking, more like a Pyrex baking pan, and you'll see that in a minute. I'm going to coat the pan with some cooking spray. And then put our bread pudding mixture into the pan. And then we're going to top it with our butter, brown sugar, and pecan mixture, and just sprinkle that over the top. And like I said, if you missed it, I'm making this dairy free. So this is a butter substitute earth balance. And then I used almond milk in the base of the with the bread. But you can use any milk of your choice, whatever you prefer. You can use real butter. Sometimes I'll use almond milk and real butter, depending on who I'm making it for. It's very, very fluid recipe. So this is going to want to bake. You'll see it's all topped there with the, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few more dried cherries and chocolate on the top, just so when you present it, you can kind of see all the ingredients that are there. And when you put this, you can put this in any baking pan you'd like. A lot of times people, if you were having a dinner party, you could put it in individual ramekins. And these are just bittersweet chocolate chips. So it's gonna want to bake between 350 and 375 for almost an hour. I usually check it around 45 minutes. And you want to make sure that the bread is firm all the way through. It almost cuts like a cake. So I'm going to show you the finished bread pudding that the half of the recipe that I made earlier. It kind of, this one almost looks like a stuffing, but when it won't taste like one, and when we present it on the plate, it won't look like one. So I'm going to take a scoop of this warm bread pudding, and it holds together. Like I said, it eats more like a cake than a custard. It holds up to itself. And there's these nice ooey gooey bits. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, really yummy. All right. And at the cafe, even if we're not making the bread pudding dairy free, we always use coconut cream milk, whipped cream. And that's because it's on some of the breakfast dishes that we offer. And so it's just all that we have in-house. And how we make that is one of these whipped cream canisters. If you don't have something like this at home, and you want to, if you're dairy free and you want to use whipped coconut cream as an option, I definitely suggest, this is a really simple Amazon purchase. I think this one was about $25. And you just need to get the whipped cream chargers to go along with it. You just shake the can of coconut milk and pour it in. You want this bottle to be a little chilled. You pour it in the bottle. You hold the bottle upside down and you add the whipped cream charger, and it will puncture the charger and put aerate all through the whipped cream, all through the cream itself. So you can sweeten it, but we don't do that. We just use a basic can of coconut milk, empty it into here, and just make sure the air gets shaken throughout the cream itself. And then I'll see if I can show you. It's really nice, fluffy, and it doesn't have any additional sweetener in it. So you have the real sweet flavor of the bread pudding, and then you have a nice balance. And if the bread pudding's warm and the coconut cream is cold, it's really delicious. And I'll just give a little shake of cinnamon. And there you have it. This one really quick. So this is really simple. Let me see if there's any questions or anything, or if I missed anything.
If anybody has any questions, then they can unmute now. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, this is Sandra Kelly.
Hi, Sandra.
I have used the Earth Balance, but I've never seen the size container you have. Is that
Yeah.
available at all stores?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this box here. This was a box of 4 sticks, so kind of a basic. I know they sell it in tubs as well, but yeah, you can get this at pretty much any natural market, I would say.
Okay, and my second comment is I've heard a lot of tips in my cooking experiences. Yours in warming butter has to be the best.
Sticking it in your bosom.
The best.
Or the other one. Yeah.
No, the first one.
Well, your hands are free, and then you just kind of do what you got to do, and
Sure.
then it's usually soft by the time you need it.
Thank you. That was
Thank you.
delightful.
So I'm gonna bring this. I'm gonna bring the bread pudding down to the library. I'll probably drop it off tomorrow morning when they open. So if anyone who's on island wants to try it, it'll be there, and I'll give them some coconut cream, and maybe they can put it on a paper plate and let you give it a go, as long as it doesn't get eaten.
I was gonna say, you better come early.
Yeah.
We get hungry here.
I know. I'll probably just take a portion or two for the family and bring everything else down there. But we'll have the yeah, I feel like I had so much to say about each ingredient, but I think I went through it all.
Would you say this is your signature dessert at Persephone's Kitchen?
We serve this most days in the spring and in the fall. So we typically don't have it in the summer, just because it is such a cold weather dish, which is partly why I chose it for today. But yeah, we do have this most often. And like I said, it'll always have a different base of, it's always the crusty bread, but it'll always have a different kind of rotation of what other baked goods will be found in it. And like, so if it's more fruit, if we have like blueberry muffins or raspberry scones or anything like that mixed in, then it'll be more of a fruit-based bread pudding. And I would suggest, if you are kind of saving and making a bread pudding stock, like adding stuff to your freezer, just letting whatever you have on hand, whatever you put aside, kind of take you where the bread pudding wants to go, basically. and I kind of gave you some of those ideas in the earlier when we first started, but
You don't have to eat it warm, though. You can eat it cold, right?
no. Oh yeah, you can eat it cold. And this is more of a dessert version because it does have the chocolate and the cherries and there is a good amount of sugar in it. But you could cut the sugar and you can make like a cheddar chive and like up the eggs even and make it more like a breakfast bread. There's lots of variations you could do to or make it more fruit centered. So it's more of a breakfast food too.
Yeah, when I make it, I like to make it with ice cream on top.
Yes, definitely a good option.
Anybody else have any questions? She's did a wonderful job here. I love it.
Is it sugar free?
No.
No. No, I did use the coconut sugar, and that's partly because like when I cook at home, I cook with coconut sugar and more dairy substitutes, and oftentimes gluten-free too, but not here, not now, and nobody in my family has to eat gluten-free. I just think a good variety is always important. But then it was also just regular brown sugar on the topping too. So it's just good to have a nice balance.
I can attest, I've eaten it from your cafe. It's very good.
I think it was a request from the library, and then I felt like it was suited. It suited home cooking as well as a nice winter treat. So
That's like the daydream if you were open in the winter, would be like getting more.
I know, like warm drinks and warm stews and yeah,
Fresh
I
bread.
crave it too.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the dairy free and sort of cook. I use a lot of almond milk and coconut sugar and things like that in my baking as well. When you make it, you said that this was a half recipe. When you make it in the 9x12, that's 10 eggs and 2 cups and
It is, yeah.
10 cups of bread. Okay, and how
Yeah.
much would that serve, do you think? How much does the half thing serve?
I'll cut it because it is cuttable. You can cut this, it's firm enough. So I usually get 12 pieces, but that's a big piece of bread pudding, and that's because we're serving it at the cafe. You want to get what you pay for. But that's a big 9x12 pan of this. Will go a really long way. I would say you could even serve twice that amount of people if you were bringing it to a party or something. But also having the recipe worked out really well. It's just something that it was easy to make it in a 9x12, but I think making half the recipe worked out perfectly fine.
We close the door because this is outside.
Would you?
That's my
provide-
daughter on the screen there. That's really exciting. She's watching the progress.
You followed
Would
your
you
voice.
Go ahead.
Oh, would you be providing the recipe again? I came in a little late, or is
Yeah,
that a problem?
No,
We'll
no,
put-
I planned on sending the like a hard copy of the recipe to the librarians, and they'll distribute it, or I can post it on the bulletin too.
Thanks.
I know you answered that, Judy, but I don't know what you said.
Yeah, so we will be putting it online too. We just had another person join us here.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that went so quickly. I think I was like, maybe over prepared. I don't know, but it's also
No,
a
you
very simple recipe, which I was hoping to introduce. So
You did a great job and we thank you. And if anybody else has any more questions.
I'll show everyone the final product again. And,
Oh, that
and
looks
say
great.
there will be bread pudding at the library. The librarian's like, you guys do not want me telling people this. But if you want to come down and try a little bit, I know that in our kitchens community is very generous with each other and likes to be able to taste. So that's an option.
So, any other
So,
questions?
That was great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm
Can't
happy to. If anyone has requests, I'm happy to do this again sometime in the future before we get going in the summer. So, yeah, happy
That
to.
would be awesome. Or maybe we'll book you for next year.
Or next year, that's fine, yeah.
So, well, if there's
Well,
no
thank
other
you.
questions. Any other questions? Anybody got anything?
Pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yes, it's very lovely.
Well, you know, it'll be interesting. I'll be trying to do it and we'll see what happens. It won't be if you made it look.
I think this is something we really can't mess up.
Somebody said something and I didn't hear.
Yeah, what time does the library open
10 o'clock.
Yeah, what-
tomorrow? All right.
Is it 11 tomorrow?
No, 10.
10, okay. I'll bring it down right at 10.
Okay. We're gonna
All right,
have guests.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again so much. You want to say
Thank you.
Goodbye, Mom.
goodbye? Say,
I'll see you
later.
guys soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
This is fabulous.
Thanks, everybody, for
you.
joining us, and we'll see you next month
Or tomorrow.
or tomorrow for, oh yeah, we'll see you at the library tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Persephone. It
All
was
right,
lovely.
thank you. Take care.
Yeah, gonna end this.
Your scrunchie's on the back.
Everybody, and.